I'm really, really excited for this. I want to just take a poll initially. How many of you all have taken media law so far? A couple of folks. So it's, it's required for the journalism majors, but I would encourage anyone on any track to take it. And, as a communication major, I think regardless of the track that you're on, a legal career may not be the most intuitive path for lots of folks. I think that there's a lot of people who find their way into law. As an instructor, I often find people who are in my classes who maybe seem like they're not quite ripe for the legal sort of aspect of things, but end up falling into it. I've written a number of letters of recommendation to law schools in my time here, but I think the law itself can be kind of intimidating for folks, and the vocabulary of case law and things like that can seem like a completely different language, and I think it can intimidate a lot of people. And so I'm really excited to have the experts that we have here who work regularly, and as we've been talking, across all sorts of areas of the law, all Murrow graduates who are coming back to kind of share some of their thoughts and ideas. So I want to introduce all of our esteemed panelists, and then I have a couple of questions that I want to kind of open it up to them for, but I would really hope that this turns into a bit of a conversation. So if you have questions for our panelists, I would love for you to raise your hand and speak up, and we would love to get more of a conversation, especially in this kind of more intimate panel setting. So just to introduce everyone that we have, on the far right we have Jill Ballo, who graduated with a broadcast degree from Murrow and interned at KXLY Spokane and spent a decade as a news producer at KOMO in Seattle, and says that media law was her favorite class at Murrow, already my favorite panelist. And after 10 years in journalism, she decided to make the leap to go to law school. And in fact, and I don't know who will dispute this claim, but says that she was the only UW law student with a Cougar license plate. So we can fact check that. But already getting points here. After doing media and commercial speech trial work for a Seattle law firm, she was recruited to work at Microsoft, where she now advises on complex issues related to their new AI services. Next to her, we have Alisa Smith, who is a Murrow graduate in the class of 2018, where she majored in journalism with an emphasis on broadcast news. She went on to study at the University of Washington School of Law, which again we won't hold against her. I don't know what her license plate looks like, but she got her JD in 2021, and she began her legal career as a criminal defense attorney, advocating for people who are involved in the justice system. Ended up becoming working in the prosecutor's office at for the city of Seattle, where she specialized in prosecuting offenders of domestic violence. And then she took over a dozen cases to trial and sought justice for survivors of domestic violence, and is currently an associate attorney for FAVROS law, where she represents healthcare providers in medical malpractice litigation. So a wide range of experience there. On our far left, we have Caryn Ragin, who's an attorney, public servant, and community advocate practicing in Washington State. Her legal work spans real property, estate planning, civil litigation matters, where she represents individuals, families, small businesses in advisory and contested proceedings involving housing stability, asset protection, enforcement of property rights. And she has a professional background in public interest organizing and a focus on civic engagement and community outreach in areas regarding national elections, private legal practice, representing clients in all of these real estate areas, and engaging in a lot of civic leadership through local boards and commissions. And then last but certainly not least, we have Kennedy Woodward, who is a proud 2018 graduate from the Murrow College. She's currently a fellow at the Reporters Committee of Freedom of the Press, which if you've taken my class, I have recommended so many times as a resource for First Amendment law, especially for journalists, and is part of the Dechert Impact Fellowship Program, which provides recent law school graduates the opportunity to spend a year at a pro bono organization. And prior to joining that, she served as a law clerk to Judge Thomas O. Rice in the U.S. District Court in the Eastern District of Washington. So we have a number of people who have spanned all sorts of areas, either intentionally or finding their way into that career. So I'm really excited because, as I mentioned, so many people who come through my classes, I see a sort of intimidation of the legal profession or the class itself or the work that's associated with it. And I don't have nearly as much experience as all of the folks on this panel of exactly what that looks like, and to kind of demystify the process a little bit. So I wanted to open up with just a question of how each of you all found yourselves in law, whether that's, coming out of Murrow. Where were you when you came out of the Murrow College? What were you thinking about what you wanted to do with your career? Was law a part of it, or how did you find your way into this career given where you started in the Murrow College? I don't know who wants to take that first, but I'd be interested in hearing from everybody.
I can go first.
Sure.
Because I was just having this conversation. I think law for me was always sort of in the back of my mind. It was always something I was interested in. And it was really, I think my junior year, I was taking media law at the same time that I was taking constitutional law. I'm a double poli-sci and communications graduate. And they were back to back. I had like 10 minutes to sprint up a hill. And so I just it was such a fun semester, and I just found myself really enjoying the work, learning about the law and the history that goes into how the law is made. And so, I thought this is a great opportunity to sort of take a great degree from the Murrow School and, use it for something else. And so I took 2 years off between undergrad and law school and did some self-discovery, did some work, and decided that that's sort of the route that I wanted to take. So I think that's what did it for me.
Like Kennedy, I actually came into school knowing I wanted to go to law school. And I chose communication because, like a lot of communication students, I really enjoy sports and I enjoy entertainment, and I had, at the time, I thought I wanted to be an agent. So I was going to, do PR, and that's what I majored in PR, and then I was going to go to law school. And I ended up doing some research with the McNair program, which is like a research program. I don't know if they still have it on campus, but I did some research with them, and I really just started wanting my law career to mean something, to really impact people. So I ended up going to law school, getting my master's in like political communication, and then also going to law school and then doing some work in politics and all of that. And so that's kind of how I ended up in law. I always knew I wanted to go to law school, but I kind of changed my focus as I was going through school. So.
And I spent 10 years in journalism. So I think I was a little more of a late bloomer when it came to realizing I wanted to go to law school. I am from Seattle. I was working in Seattle at Como TV, producing the evening news, which I'm older, so back then, the whole town actually watched the news and didn't get their news elsewhere other than from the 3 major networks. So it was very exciting. And I started to get recruited to go to other cities, and I realized that I wasn't sure I just wanted to be in TV news anymore. I mean, it was just in the back of my head. And when we had a newsroom lawyer, she worked at a law firm in town, and since I produced the evening news, if somebody was threatening to sue us because we were going to put an investigative story on the air, I would send the script to her. Or if we had a photographer who would get kicked off public property during, a crime investigation, we would call her and she'd go to court, and the judge would issue an emergency, ruling that the photographers have to be allowed on public property. So one day, I think I was having kind of a bad day, and she came to do a newsroom seminar to everybody to talk about, the First Amendment of free speech and what our reporters and photographers could and couldn't do, and what our journalism stories could and couldn't say. And she brought a woman with her who looked like me, and she was a second-year lawyer. And she said, "This is Sharon. She's a second-year lawyer. She's helping me now, and she used to be a newspaper reporter for 2 years." And I remember standing in the back of the room because my show was about to go on and my hands were crossed, and I was like, if she did that, maybe I could do it too. So I talked to our lawyer, and she's like, "Oh no, TV's so exciting. You don't need to be another lawyer. There's already too many lawyers in this country." But she encouraged me to go to UW and just sit in on a class. And the only class I had time to sit in on was tax law. And I went back to her and told her that was really interesting. And she was like, "You're kidding me." And I said, "No, it seemed really interesting." So I went to law school. Como told me that if I didn't like it after a year, I stayed in town. If I didn't like it after a year, I could come back. But I love law school for reasons we'll get into. But the other thing is, I was talking to my dad, who, interestingly, the 2 professions that he distrusts the most are journalism and lawyers. He works in science, but my parents were so supportive, and my dad said, "Why don't you go, because maybe you won't be a lawyer and education won't help you as a lawyer, but the education will never hurt you." He's like, "I run across so many people who've gone to law school who stay in journalism. They go to business, or they do all these different things with this degree, because it's kind of like an communications degree on steroids." So that's how I ended up in law school. Yeah.
Very nice.
I ended up in law school because when I first came to college, I wanted to be a news reporter, And specifically, I wanted to be a legal correspondent. And obviously, you have to go to law school if you really want to understand the law. So for me, it was kind of a catalyst to be able to do a career as a legal correspondent. I get to law school, and I really realized that I really loved criminal law, and I really wanted to work in that space. I ended up leaving criminal law because I just needed a break from it, and now I'm doing medical malpractice. But when I was in law school, it was mostly just so that I could use that degree to, work on TV as a legal correspondent. And then once I got there, I kind of realized that, maybe I do want to practice law a little bit too. So that's where I am, and I think that, a law degree can be beneficial to you regardless of what you end up wanting to do with it. It never hurts, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
It never hurts. It just adds to your knowledge base.
And there's still time. You could be a legal correspondent.
Yeah, I could. Never know.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to hear so many different backgrounds to it. And some of you all sort of talked about that. Jill mentioned sort of like a JD or going to law school is kind of getting a communications degree on steroids, which is, I think, a really interesting way of framing it. And Caryn sort of saying that you always knew you wanted to go into law, but there was some decision that you made to go to communications to sort of develop some of those skills to help you get there. So I guess my follow-up question before we try to open things up and see if other folks have questions for our panelists is, what would you say about your time at Murrow, or some of the skills that you learned here that you think translate well or most easily into a legal field? And what are the different kinds of roles that you can have in a legal career where a communications degree, either in PR or journalism, can really help? I think naturally, if you're a journalist and you're doing investigative stuff, but I think some of the other skills that you may learn in Murrow may not as intuitively apply to law as much as they really do in practice. So I'd love to hear what you all think about your training in Murrow, and what skills some of the students who may have an inkling of law school maybe in their mind, what they should sort of consider as far as the skills they'll come out of Murrow with, and what they're capable of with that.
Well, I was actually talking to someone about this yesterday, and now more than ever, because I've done different iterations of my career, I've done contracts, I've worked in a nonprofit, different things like that, and as a litigator doing trial work, now more than ever, I value the ability to tell the story, because you really have to lay the foundation for the judge or the jury so that they understand why the law matters in this situation. And I think that was really honed for me in my public relations. So in public relations, when I was taking it, you learned a little bit about journalism, but you also learned a lot about public speaking, and really just representing your client and getting their side out and in front of the desired audience. And that's a lot of what you do in trial. You're getting out there first and foremost. If you're the plaintiff, and if you're the defendant, it matters so much more to get your story out there and really lay that foundation of why the law matters. And because for the most part, you have these laws, and it's really less about the law and more about convincing your trier of fact about how to interpret or how to view that law to these facts. And so that is something that I just value so much for my communication degree, because it's really that's what it is. It's about wrapping your specific fact pattern around a certain law and saying, this is why you should see it my way.
I'll piggyback on that, because I think that comes down to anybody who graduates from Murrow. I'm convinced anybody who graduates from Murrow can go to law school and do well, because you know how to ask questions and you know how to write simply. It doesn't matter which track you're in, you can ask questions to get the facts, and you can write a very clear message. Like, for example, like what you were saying, I started as a litigator too. Well, let me back up to law school. You go to law school with a lot of philosophy majors and English majors and history majors who don't know how to write a lead or a very straightforward factual article. Like if you say, can you tell me the story in 4 sentences, you'll get, like, my friends in law school, I tease them, you'd get like 2 pages with run-on sentences. It's just a different way of presenting information. So all of us here know how to write a very crisp, simple message. So writing in law school, which you do a lot of, was a breeze, probably for all, I'm nodding, for all four of us. Then when you get to your law firm or wherever you're going, your job is to figure out what the facts are and then overlay the law. Like, you have to know what the facts are, and after that, then you figure out, here's the rules, okay, here's how they apply to my facts. So what do we all do as new lawyers, especially, or trial lawyers? We have to figure out what the facts are. So even before trial, you get to go to depositions where lawyers on both sides sit in a room, and one by one you interview the witnesses for like a day or half a day or 2 days. Well, it was shocking to me also that I could go in as the most junior lawyer there and start to interview somebody, and I could get them to spill almost anything. And the older male seasoned lawyers would be like, how did you get around to that conversation where somebody just shared everything? And I said, because it's my journalism background. You know, you have to be relatable, and then you can kind of go in for the to get the information you need. So I just go back to like asking questions and writing simply. Everybody here can do it. You'd be shocked how many people in law school cannot when they get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about Com 300 in other panels today, and we all know Com 300 is intimidating, but I really do think that it teaches you exactly how to write for law school. I mean, not exactly, but pretty close, and it teaches you, you know, attention to detail. You're going to fail an assignment if you forget a period, but if you spell your client's name wrong, that's not great. So I think that it really, it preps you very well for what you'll experience. And I also think being intellectually curious and asking questions is huge. And I think, you know, you'll all get that with your Murrow degrees. So
I think for me, the thing that comes to mind is advocacy, because as Murrow students, you're learning how to interview subjects, and then you're telling their stories. And that's really, I think, one of the things that inspired me about law school in general was getting the opportunity to interview people for news stories, and then thinking to myself, I don't want to just tell their story, I want to like really advocate for them. And so then when I went on to become an attorney, I was able to advocate for clients, you know, those who were facing prosecution, those who were victims of domestic violence, now doctors who are being sued. And I think that having that background and knowing how to interview people, but also how to connect with them on an emotional level, right? When you're interviewing people, you're not just writing down everything they're saying, you're really trying to feed out all the information from them, and you're sharing that human connection, sharing those emotions. And I'm sure you can all think of somebody that you've interviewed for a comm class that, you know, has really stuck with you and made you think, you know, like, we had such a good conversation, and that's something that I'll remember. I think that being an attorney is kind of taking that next step and saying, I'm not just sharing their story, but I'm walking with them, and I'm helping them advocate for themselves and for their legal interests. So I think that that's a huge thing that you can take away from the Murrow College.
Yeah, I really do love the comparison of saying, you know, if you're studying broadcast news and journalism, be an investigative journalist for your client. If you're studying public relations and marketing, be a public relations and marketing agent for your client, or whoever you're defending and whoever you're telling the story for. I think that's a really powerful way to kind of, you know, shed some light on where I think a lot of people have a lot of skills in this college that I think they may not think apply nearly as much to the area of law that they do. I have some other questions, but I would love to open it up to the audience. If anyone has questions for any of our panelists, I would love to field some questions if there's any inquiries you all have. Yeah, over here.
So Kennedy, you mentioned that you took a gap year before you went to law school, and Jill, you also mentioned that, you know, you
A gap decade?
Yep, decade, yeah. And so how did that affect getting into law school for you guys?
Great question.
I think there are, as is evident up here, there are all kinds of different people that go to law school. There are people who go right from undergrad to law school. There are people who take a decade off. There are people who are parents who are working and also going to law school. So it's not prohibitive to take a gap year. I actually took 2 years and worked for those 2 years. And I found that I just needed a break from school. I also felt like it helped me. There's definitely benefits from going right from undergrad to law school, because you're already in the study mindset and you're, just taking a summer off and then starting. But I felt like I gained a lot of skills in the workforce that I could then transfer to my summer internships and my externships during law school. I also worked with lawyers. I took 2 years to work on Capitol Hill. And so I got to see the law from a different perspective, people writing the law. And that was cool too. I got to work with some really smart people. And so for me, it was a good 2 years. I learned a lot about myself. I grew up a little bit, and then felt like I was ready to really dive back in to school and give it my all.
So I had good grades here. I didn't have fabulous grades because I love WSU. My parents went here, and I said we all went here. So I had just under a 3.6 when I graduated from Murrow, and I only applied to Seattle University and University of Washington in Seattle because I didn't want to move because I only thought I was going to go for a year. So I got into this, I don't know if this is TMI, but this is the truth. Like if you're thinking about law school, I got into Seattle U right away. I was waitlisted at the University of Washington, and I called, and at the time it was ranked better, and it was like a third of the price of Seattle U, which was private. So I really wanted to get into the UW, but I was waitlisted, and I was convinced it was because, you look at the grades that people are entering. They're like 3.85 is the average, and they went to all these fancy schools, and I did well on the LSAT, but my grades were below average. Anyway, I finally got a call. I got into the UW. I had complete imposter syndrome. Like 100% imposter syndrome. I don't belong here. I'm not smart enough. I'm not like everybody else. I went down the list. There was only 120 people in our class, where everybody went. Oh, and how old they were, because they were almost all younger than me. But I got there the first day, and the dean of the law school said, oh, we have all these great students coming in. Somebody was a fighter pilot, and somebody was this and that, an MD. And we have someone who was an Emmy-nominated producer. And I kind of caved inside because I was like, oh my gosh, she didn't want me here, but now she's bragging about me. It was this weird, it was just kind of this insecurity, imposter. So I didn't say anything. But I was like, I guess I belong here. I'm sure they let me in because I had prior experience in the communications field. That's my point, is that started to outweigh a little bit the fact that my grades were lower than the other entrants. Fast forward 3 years, this is probably TMI, but I'm telling you this not to brag. It's kind of embarrassing. I graduated in the top 5% of my class, which means I was somewhere in the top 7 people out of the 120 that graduated. I know I wasn't number 1 because the guy that helped found Microsoft was number 1 and let us all know about it. But, people didn't know that I was doing that well because I was pretty quiet. In law school, we have gunners who raise their hand and answer questions, all the time. But my point is, it's like I'm envious of those of you who got in after 1 or 2 years. It took me 10 years, but so be it. It was great. So, but I think that's why I got in, because I had experience in the real world. So whether you wait 1 or 2 or 5 or however many, the experience you have now with whatever you're doing now, you can spin that in your application into something that's good. I'm happy to help anybody write a law school application if you ever want.
Can I speak to that real quick?
Yeah.
Because, so I went to my master's right after undergrad, and part of it was because I had so many people saying, we don't need more lawyers in the world,
Oh, yeah,
right?
right.
And so for a second, I doubted my own path that I had known I wanted to do since high school. And I ended up doing my master's because I wanted to finish, but I actually took a break from that and went and started working as a legislative aide. And I have to say, I think that that experience in the real world, it does wonders for you. Whether you knew you wanted to go all along or had the grades, it just changes everything, because I think law school is much more, it's professional school, right? So it's not like undergrad. And I think a lot of people came in thinking this is an extension of undergrad and really struggled their first year because they were in, and I think when you are in the workforce, you kind of come in like, this is work, and having, had to pay your own way or whatever in the real world, kind of sort of say, you also look at that price tag and you go, this is expensive work, and I'm going to get the most I can out of it. So honestly, I don't think it ever hurts to get some experience in life.
Yeah, and it's such a great question, because I think so many students think about that as far as, like, wanting to take time off of school or wanting to pursue something else and eventually finding their way into being interested in these topics. And the people who are making decisions about who to let in and looking at applications like this, just like, they're telling you, use your journalism and PR skills to, advocate for your client. Use those storytelling skills to advocate for yourself, right? Being able to figure out how each of your professional experiences builds into this narrative of wanting to be involved in the law. And I guarantee you, every one of you who's in any career is going to intersect with law at some point.
Yeah.
For one reason or another, for better or for worse. And the better you are at navigating those decisions, the better. But especially if you're thinking you want to be involved in this, if you want to report on, be a legal correspondent or have any kind of expertise like that, there's no shame in taking a couple of years to figure out what you're doing. And like is being said here, people appreciate people who have been in the workforce and been professional for several years and then come into what is essentially like a trade school almost of training to be this specific kind of professional. I think people appreciate that a lot than sometimes people just coming right out and, like you said, thinking of it as that extension. So it's a wonderful question. Any other questions from the audience? Yeah, absolutely.
Jill, in your introduction, I heard you mentioned about AI services that you were involved in.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit more on that? I'm very curious to hear about it.
So I've been at Microsoft now for 20 years. I've always been what we call a product attorney, which means, so we have three types of attorneys at Microsoft. Essentially, we have attorneys that just do like sales deals all day long, like sell to United Airlines, they negotiate the contract. We have attorneys like that all over the world. That's probably the biggest group. And then we have some specialists like antitrust attorneys or a few copyright specialists. But then we have this third group, which is product attorneys. So we are assigned a product group. Like there's a group of attorneys that all they do is do legal work for Xbox. Or they might even do legal work just for third-party games that are put on Xbox. And there's an Office lawyer and a Word lawyer and a Outlook lawyer. And anyway, so I've supported many of those different product groups. We're like a mini general counsel. Basically, I sit with the developers, and I love working with developers because they're very fact-based, so it's not as hard to get the facts out. If you work with like the salespeople, sometimes the facts aren't so straight because they're just trying to get you to say yes. But like the engineers and even the marketing people I work with, because I look at how they're writing a campaign to sell a product, and it's like, well, is this right or is this an exaggeration? Is this right or not? We go through to make sure all the facts are right. But I really sit with the developers all day, and they say, hey, Jill, we're going to create this new product that uses AI, and we're going to go grab data from all these different places so we can tell you, what sales calls, you're a salesperson. We're going to tell you when you get up in the morning, here's the 3 people you should call to make sure that you meet your sales quota today by looking through your emails and all your documents. It's like, well, wait a minute. Let's back up here. Does the AI that you're using have, the rights to go look at your emails? Does it have the rights to go look at your Word documents? Does it have a go right, to look at all your notes? And so we kind of dial it back, and then we go through every step and make sure that based on privacy laws, and European privacy laws are really difficult. We sit and we just make sure that whatever product you're going to buy and use as a college student or as an employee at a company has the proper warnings on it. It has the proper behavior. We know exactly, we tell you what you're doing. We at Microsoft, and I'll get to AI, I guess, in a second, but at Microsoft, we try to create a product that works everywhere in the world. We can't have 20 different products for 20 different countries, but Europe has the biggest, the most stringent privacy laws. Can you guess what country that originated in? Germany. After World War II, their privacy laws, due to the Holocaust, were extremely stringent and protective of humans' individual rights. And so a lot of which is fabulous, like a lot of the privacy laws that have come up now are based on what happened in Germany in World War II. So as far as AI, I support a whole bunch of our co-pilot and AI engineers. What's hard is, you remember I said before, you have to take the facts that you have, like what does a product do, and overlay what the law says is okay or not okay to do. There's not a lot of AI laws out there right now. Mm-hmm. So we're using existing laws like consumer protection, like how do we get consent from you to use your data, or negligence law. What does Microsoft have a right to do to prevent harm versus tell you what to do to prevent your own harm? We're trying to overlay with existing laws, but it's I would say I spend a lot more time thinking about policy right now than law. And we have government affairs and political scientists who go out and talk to people in different countries and different states. Right now we're trying to help the 50 states in the United States not come up with 50 different sets of AI laws. Because often when that happens, 2 states will be opposed, and no company, whether it's Meta or Google or banks or anybody, can then abide by 2 laws that conflict. So did that kind of answer it?
Yeah. I was just curious.
Yeah.
So did we have a question up here earlier?
Oh, yes.
Please.
Hi, I'm Madison. I am currently studying pre-law. I graduate in December, and I actually was told by my career advisor to come to the Murrow Symposium. So it's been a wonderful time. I'm really happy to get to hear everyone's stories. It's really informative and super interesting. I am planning on taking a little bit of time off before I go to law school, and I guess some of you guys said kind of your why behind going to law school. So if you care to elaborate more on that, I would love to hear. And then also, what made you decide your specific area of law?
You want to answer that? You've done several different areas.
Yeah. So the why I decided to go to law school, like I said, I wanted to be a legal correspondent, but I would say that the thing that, when I was talking about everyone having someone that they remember interviewing and kind of connecting with, for me, that ended up kind of becoming my application for law school. Mm-hmm. I was on a study abroad through the Murrow College over in Greece, which, by the way, everyone should do a study abroad through the Murrow College. It was amazing. While I was there, I got to interview a Syrian refugee mother and learn about her experience living in Syria and having to flee to Greece. And it was the most impactful interview I've ever done. I will always remember it, and I ended up using that as my application, kind of just my cover letter as to why I wanted to be a lawyer. And for me, it was, I didn't want to just tell her story. I wanted to be able to advocate for women like her. And moving forward, my goal for my career is I really want to advocate for women and use my career in the law to advance the rights for women. So I think that I guess I would say is my why. And I think that I have had a little bit of variety in my career. When I first went to law school, I was also realized I was really interested in criminal law. I've always been a crime junkie, love watching all the documentaries and all the podcasts and things. And so criminal law really interested me, and I also really wanted to be a trial attorney because, I just thought it would be fun. And part of, I think, sometimes being a communications student, especially a broadcast news student, is an inherent love for public speaking. So I was like, I want to use my love for doing that and, actually be in the courtroom. And that was amazing. I got to represent not only defendants, but also, victims. And I think that was just a very impactful experience. I will say that criminal law itself, it's not for the faint of heart. It was something that I did for a while and I needed a break from, which is totally fine. I think when you go into your career, you may have an idea of exactly what you want to do, but sometimes life, tells you, hey, you need to try something different, take a different path. It's never straightforward. So I was needing a break, and I saw that there was a job opening for a medical malpractice defense firm, and I was like, oh, that could be really interesting and a new challenge, so I decided to take that. But one thing that I think is really cool about a career in the legal field is that you're not really tied to one specific subcategory of thing to, of type of law. There are specialties, but I think that especially if you're newer in your legal career, you can kind of make changes pretty easily. So it's cool to get to have, different perspectives and get to try out different things.
My boss used to be a real estate lawyer in
No
Seattle,
way, yeah.
developing commercial
Yeah.
real estate before he switched to tech law. So,
Yeah.
you can switch. It's not
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah, and are there any other questions from the audience? Yeah, do you have another one?
Yeah, I have another one. I'm pre-law, and I was thinking about, I don't want to go immediately into law school, and I'm actually not even sure if I want to do it or not, So I really want to try and get more experience in the industry, and I was wondering what y'all's recommendations were for networking or gaining experience or, getting internships and such.
And not necessarily in the law itself, but what fields could you get involved with professionally that would contribute to a law career, or both?
Yeah, I mean, before I go to law school, I would like to understand what I'm getting myself into.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously not, something I would need a degree for, but something that still lets me experience kind of what I'd be getting myself into, if that makes any sense.
This may sound crazy, but just calling people. So after my first year here, I went and got an internship with a local attorney. She was a retired judge, and she'd gone back into practice, and she's like still my mentor to this day. And so working with her did two things for me. One, she would later retire, she was on her last bid for a judge, and so she was doing her campaign. That's how I started with politics. But I also would work for her because they had a firm together. I would spend half my time working on her campaign. I'd spend half my time at their law firm. And it was so impactful. And, I'm like 18, 19, so I obviously didn't know anything about the law, but just being in that environment, I learned about depositions, I learned about so much. And it literally just came from my mom had done a consultation with her husband and found out who she was, and I literally called them, and they were like, well, come down with your resume. I came down with my resume, didn't know them, never met a lawyer in my life, and they just were willing to help. And that sounds like a crazy story, but there are so many people I find in law that really want to help. Like, I don't think I've ever really been turned down for somebody wanting to help me. If I've asked and been like, I don't know anything about this, can I come and shadow you, or can I? And it's just being brave, because so many people are not brave enough to call. Just, there's different organizations, there's women in law and different things like that. If you just call one of them and say, hey, I'm just looking for resources, how do I find it? People will connect you because they're so excited that someone was brave enough to ask. And I walked in one day and was just like, you met my mom some time ago, and she did a consultation with you, and she told me I should call you, and here's my resume, and it was like on pink paper, and and they were just like, it's impressive that you even came down here. And they were like, we'll pay you $20 an hour to file papers for us. And I was like, done. And I did that for like 2 summers for them. And then when she retired and she opened up her own firm later on, I worked for her after I got out of law school. And so it just became this lifelong thing, because I walked in off and was like, can I come in and show you my resume? And so,
Do you think
yeah.
I'm in a company, not in a law firm, but do you think people here could actually get a marketing internship at a law firm? Law firms have to pitch for clients as well. Or a customer. I think law firms still have departments where.
Oh, especially nowadays. Do you see all the law firms I follow them on TikTok and stuff, with all their little, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think especially the bigger ones probably have marketing departments.
Yeah, like my old firm in Seattle does. You know, they have like 4 or 5 young women and men who are putting together conferences and marketing packets, and Spokane probably has firms like that too. Are you at Dechert?
I'm not at Dechert.
Oh,
right
okay.
now.
That's a huge.
Dechert-
She's affiliated to a very big blue chip
Dechert-
fancy firm.
Dechert is sponsoring my fellowship.
Okay.
But I will say, what I was going to say is, I think that if you have something that you're interested in, so for instance, I thought I was going to go into environmental law, and I did not do that. But the summer after I graduated from WSU, I took an internship with Senator Cantwell's office in DC. I was very lucky and fortunate to be able to do that. But I picked her office because I wanted to do environmental work, and she at the time was the ranking member on the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. And so I geared all of my work that summer, to the extent that I could, toward the committee, the work that she would do with the committee. And the goal of the summer was like, if I get a job in DC, that's great. If I don't, I'll come back and do something in Spokane or Seattle and study for the LSAT. But at the end of my summer, a job opened up on committee, and I wanted it so bad. And I applied, and I didn't get it, and I was devastated. And so I emailed the staff director of the committee, and I said, hey, this is the first job I've ever really wanted, truly wanted. And so I just would like to know what you didn't see in me, so that the next time something like this happens, I will be prepared and I'll do better. And so she ended up asking to meet me for coffee, and we talked, and she gave me some interview advice. And she ended up having another job, and a better job, that opened like a month later. And she just emailed me directly and was like, hey, you know, my assistant is going to work on a congressional campaign. Do you want to come be my assistant? And so to your point, sometimes you just got to ask. Sometimes you have to ask the hard questions. And I've also been on the receiving end of people asking me for coffee. I've asked so many people for coffee. So if there's something that you're interested in, that lawyers also do, whether it's environmental law, whether you're excited about TikTok, whatever it is, I guarantee there are lawyers that work in that field. And if you could position yourself to be in proximity to the lawyers so that you can learn what they do, I think that's always beneficial.
I would add, I think some of the specific positions that come to mind for me that I know a lot of people from law school started off doing were paralegals. That's a really good place to start, because you're working directly with an attorney. I knew countless students in law school who were paralegals before. You could also be a court clerk, a law clerk clerking for a judge. You're in the courtroom. You're the one that's entering all the exhibits and all of the proceedings into the record. They work really closely with judges. They get to see a lot of trials. You could be a bailiff. You get to work with the jurors and people coming into the courtroom. So those are the ones that come to mind for me, of ways that you can kind of get exposure to the courtroom and to the legal profession without actually having to get a law degree first.
Yeah, it's never underestimate the power of a cold email to someone. A lot of people, I mean, myself included, even as an academic, and I'm sure this is true across other fields, but even in law, that I think to a lot of people feels like this sort of dry, objective career space is, there are humans who work here who want to help people genuinely, and I think if you show that you're interested, even if you don't get a position, and reach out and say, I'm interested, the number of connections that you can make is really astounding. And really, there's no shame in sending that email. The worst thing that they can do is not respond. And it's not as big of a risk as you think it is when you're really struggling to hit that send button. We have time for maybe one more question if there's someone in the audience who has one. Otherwise, I have I think a good closing question for our panel members. Yeah, absolutely.
Coming from Murrow, do you feel like when you guys were in law school, what did you notice, maybe like one thing that kind of like set you apart from people that came from other schools? Like I know you're talking about how like we know how to write a very like short, concise lead that like gets to the point. So a lot of people like don't know how to do that. But what else, being a Murrow student before then going into it, helped you out?
The ability to very quickly analyze a situation and come to the nugget of most importance. Most college students don't learn that in other majors, I don't think.
I think for me it was working, I think for me this is kind of a theme, but working with individuals, working with clients, being able to interview people and get information. I think a lot of other students struggled with that because they'd never done that. But I think that being able to make those connections with other people that you're helping, I think was definitely an asset coming from this school.
I think the ability to provide analysis in a concise way is something that is different from other schools. I think the ability to take a set of facts and apply it to the law, which is really what most lawyers do, I found that to be easier, I think, than a lot of my classmates.
I would say, as communication specialists, we're social scientists, and I found that I was able to bring humanities. So, like, a lot of times you're analyzing a case, and I just remember being in, like, crim law and stuff, and we're analyzing these cases, and let's be real, and, like, some of these cases you're dealing with marginalized communities, and they'd be so dry about the facts, and they don't even see the humanity of these people who, they're just facts to them. And then you're saying, well, no, what about this? What about this circumstance? Because here's the thing. In crim law and in all sorts of other things, I can go on and on about how even property law is almost like a civil rights, because there's so much about adverse possession and all these other things, and people are fighting for this land that they've had all their lives, you know, and it becomes like a class situation, so it's civil rights and class and stuff. And so just being able to see the humanity in people and see, like, socioeconomic differences, racial differences, all these different things and how they matter, and it's not just dry facts, you'd be surprised how few people actually look at it like that. And sometimes you'll sit in class just like, oh my Lord, these are going to be legal professionals, and they don't even see that they're talking about someone's life, you know? And so even when you're in civil litigation like I am, if you think about it, when someone's arguing over a $500,000 piece of property, which in Washington is not even like a really nice property, it's just your home, that's everything they have. And so a lot of people just see the numbers. And I think if I would say one thing that I've always been complimented on as an attorney is my writing. And my clients love me. And I don't say that to brag, but like my clients always felt like, oh, I felt so much better after I talked to you. Thank you for listening. No one was listening the way you listen, because I saw like the bigger picture. And I think that absolutely has to do with communication.
Yeah, and I think everyone in the legal profession can appreciate work like that to connect with the human side of the whole thing. We're running out of time. I could ask questions for days from this panel, and I'm sure if you have additional questions, please feel free to come up and talk to our panelists. I'm sure they would be more than happy to talk to you about things in the law. I would also lightly pitch, if you are interested in taking media law, I do offer Com 415 in the fall, and I would be more than happy to have folks in here in my class as well, and maybe even some of these panelists in to give more of their insights. So thank you all for taking the time. Thank you all for everyone for coming to this panel. Please feel free to ask questions and chat them up afterwards. But thank you all.